Hello and welcome. In this video, we'll explore the AI TPACK Framework, a practical way of thinking about how artificial intelligence can be meaningfully integrated into teaching and learning. My name is Adam Stempinski, and I am an English and history teacher at Copernicus Upper Secondary School in Tarnobrzeg, Poland. I am also a teacher trainer and an e-twinning ambassador. I am passionate about project-based learning and creating meaningful international learning experiences for students and teachers. Let me start with a framework that I think gives us a very useful way of thinking about AI in education, the UNESCO AI Competency Framework for teachers. What I particularly like about this framework is that UNESCO doesn't define AI competence simply as knowing how to use ChatGPT or another AI tool. It takes a much broader view. The framework identifies 5 key dimensions. The first is a human-centered mindset. This is really the foundation. AI is developing very quickly, but education is still about people. Teachers need to remain responsible for decisions and maintain their professional judgment. The second dimension is ethics. When we use AI with our students, we need to think about privacy, bias, fairness, safety, transparency, and accountability. These aren't theoretical issues anymore. They are part of everyday classroom practice. The third is AI foundations and applications. Teachers don't need to become computer scientists, but we do need to understand enough about AI to know how it works, what its strengths are, and where its limitations lie. The fourth dimension is AI pedagogy, and this is particularly important. The question shouldn't be, which AI tool can I use in my lesson? The better question is, what do I want my students to learn, and could AI improve that learning experience? And finally, UNESCO includes AI for professional learning. AI isn't only something we use with students, it can also help us reflect on our teaching, collaborate with colleagues, develop resources, and continue learning ourselves. And there is one more important idea here: acquire, deepen, and create. So we're talking about a progression from basic AI literacy through meaningful pedagogical integration towards teachers becoming capable of creating innovative learning experiences with AI. So if we put all of that together, what does UNESCO actually want an AI-ready teacher to look like? For me, there are 5 key messages here. First, human agency. AI can give us suggestions, generate content, and analyze information, but the teacher remains the decision maker. We shouldn't hand over our professional judgment to an algorithm. Second, critical thinking. One of the most important skills in the age of generative AI is learning not to accept the first answer we get. We need to ask, is this accurate? Is it relevant? Is there bias? What evidence supports it? What might be missing? And that applies to teachers as much as it applies to students. Third, ethical use. We need to consider what data we are sharing, whose voices are represented, whether the output is fair, and whether using AI in a particular situation is actually appropriate. Fourth, pedagogy comes first. This is something I would really encourage us to remember. We shouldn't start with the tool, we should start with the learning objective, and finally, transformation. At the beginning, AI may simply help us do something faster, for example, generate a worksheet or create some questions. That's useful. But the really interesting question is, can AI help us create learning experiences that were previously difficult or impossible? And this brings me to a simple principle that summarizes the whole approach. AI can generate, teachers decide, students think. If we can keep those 3 things in the right order, we can use AI without losing what is most valuable about education: human thinking, human relationships, and human agency. Let me now move from teachers to learners. If the UNESCO framework helps us answer the question, what do teachers need to know and be able to do? The OECD AI Literacy Framework helps us answer another very important question. What should our students be able to do in a world shaped by AI? The framework was developed by the OECD together with the European Commission and is specifically designed for primary and secondary education. The important thing is that AI literacy is not understood simply as knowing how to use ChatGPT, Gemini, or another AI tool. It is much broader. Students need to understand AI, critically evaluate what it produces, use it creatively and responsibly, and perhaps most importantly, make good decisions about when they should and shouldn't use AI. The framework organizes AI literacy into four areas: engage, create, manage, and design. And I think this is a very useful way of looking at our role as teachers. Our goal isn't to produce students who are simply good AI users. Our goal is to develop students who can think critically, act responsibly, and make informed decisions in an AI-shaped world. Let's look at these four domains in a little more detail. The first is engage with AI. This is about understanding and critically interacting with AI. Students need to recognize AI-generated content and learn to question it. They should ask, is this accurate? Is it relevant? Is there bias? What evidence do we have? The second is create with AI. Here, students use AI as a creative and collaborative partner. They can brainstorm ideas, develop drafts, generate alternatives, and refine their work. But there is an important principle here. Using AI should not mean giving AI ownership of the thinking. Students still need to contribute ideas, make decisions, and take responsibility for the final product. The third domain is manage AI. This one is particularly interesting. Students need to learn that the question isn't simply, can AI do this? But rather, should AI do this? They need to decide when AI is appropriate, what they can delegate to it, what they should do themselves, and how they will monitor the results. And finally, there is design AI. Students don't necessarily need to become programmers, but they should understand some of the ideas behind AI: data, algorithms, models, training, bias, and evaluation. So, in simple terms, engage means understand and question. Create means use AI purposefully. Manage means make decisions about AI. Design means understand and shape the systems behind AI. So, what does this mean for our classrooms? I think we can see it as a progression. First, students need to understand AI. What is it? How does it work? What can it do, and what are its limitations? Then they need opportunities to use AI to create, explore, communicate, and learn. But using AI isn't enough. They also need to evaluate it. This is where critical thinking becomes absolutely essential. Students should check the information, compare sources, identify weaknesses, and improve AI-generated material. Then comes managing AI. Students need to develop the judgment to decide, should I use AI for this task? What should I ask it to do? What should I keep for myself? And ultimately, we want students to be able to shape their relationship with AI, to understand its wider impact and participate in decisions about how AI should be used. So perhaps the key message of the OECD framework can be summarized like this: don't teach students simply to use AI. Teach them to make good decisions about AI. And this changes the way we design activities. Instead of asking students simply to ask AI to write something, we might ask them to generate, evaluate, improve, and defend. AI can generate an answer, but the student has to decide whether that answer deserves to be trusted, how it should be improved, and ultimately why they agree or disagree with it. And that's where AI literacy becomes much more than technology. It becomes critical thinking, judgment, creativity, and human agency in practice. Let me introduce another framework that I think is extremely useful when we talk about technology and AI in education: TPACK. It stands for Technological Pedagogical Content Knowledge. The basic idea is actually quite simple. Effective technology integration requires us to bring together three types of knowledge. The first is content knowledge. What do I want my students to learn? This is our subject knowledge, the concepts, skills, and content we teach. The second is pedagogical knowledge. How will students learn this most effectively? This includes our teaching methods, assessment, differentiation, collaboration, and classroom strategies. And the third is technological knowledge. What technologies could support this learning? The important point is that none of these exists in isolation. Knowing a lot about technology doesn't automatically make us better teachers, and being an excellent teacher doesn't mean that every new technology will improve our lessons. TPACK is about finding the connection between the three. So the goal isn't technology for technology's sake. The goal is simple. How can technology help create better learning? When these three areas overlap, we get several different kinds of knowledge. For example, PCK, or pedagogical content knowledge, is something good teachers already use every day. It's knowing not just your subject, but how to teach that particular subject effectively. Then we have TCK, technological content knowledge. This means understanding how technology can help us represent, explore, or work with particular content. For example, a history teacher might use an interactive map to explore territorial changes, or an AI tool to generate competing interpretations of an event. Then there is TPK, technological pedagogical knowledge. This is about understanding how technology can change the way we teach, for example, using AI to provide personalized feedback or scaffolding. And finally, in the center, we have TPACK. This is where all three come together. We understand the content, we understand the pedagogy, and we understand the technology, and we know how to combine them to create a meaningful learning experience. So we could summarize the whole model as the right technology combined with the right pedagogy applied to the right content can lead to better learning. Now let's bring TPACK into the age of generative AI, and I think this is where the framework becomes particularly useful. When teachers discover a new AI tool, the natural temptation is to ask, what can I do with this tool? But TPACK encourages us to reverse the process. First, we start with the content. What should my students actually learn? Then we think about pedagogy. What kind of learning experience will help them achieve that goal? Only then do we ask about technology. Could AI make this experience more effective, more engaging, more personalized, or perhaps enable something that would otherwise be difficult to achieve? And I would add one more question because we're dealing with generative AI. What should remain human? What decisions should students make? What thinking should they do themselves? What responsibility should remain with the teacher? So I would encourage teachers to develop one simple habit. Whenever you consider using AI in a lesson, ask, why AI? If you can't give a convincing pedagogical answer, perhaps you don't need AI for that particular activity. And that's a very important shift from tool-first thinking to learning-first thinking. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine that I am teaching history and my learning goal is for students to develop an evidence-based interpretation of a historical event. I could simply ask AI to explain the event and give the students the answer, but that wouldn't necessarily produce very deep learning. Instead, I could use inquiry-based learning. I might ask students to investigate the event and then ask AI to produce two different explanations of what happened and why. Now, the interesting part begins. Students don't simply copy those explanations. They compare them. They verify the claims using primary and secondary sources. They challenge the AI's interpretations. And finally, they revise their own understanding and construct an evidence-based argument. Now we have a genuine TPACK activity. The content is historical thinking. The pedagogy is inquiry-based learning. The technology is generative AI. But the most important element is human agency. AI generates possibilities. Students evaluate the evidence, and students construct the final argument. That's the kind of AI integration that I think TPACK encourages us to aim for. Not simply using AI in a lesson, but using AI in a way that genuinely improves the learning process. Thank you for watching this video and exploring the AI TPACK framework with me.